The rhythmic patter of rain against the attic window above her bedroom was usually a sound of comfort for Amelia, a gentle lullaby that eased her into sleep. Tonight, however, it felt different, a subtle percussion against the backdrop of a growing unease she couldn't quite place. The dim glow of her salt lamp cast dancing, amber shadows on the floral wallpaper, usually a source of warmth, now seeming to flicker with a nervous energy. The air in the small room felt heavy, almost viscous. Clinging to her skin despite the slightly ajar window she'd left open for a breath of fresh air. Amelia snuggled deeper under her patchwork quilt, the familiar weight usually grounding her. She'd had a long, draining week at the antique bookstore where she worked, surrounded by the hushed whispers of history and the delicate scent of aged paper. All she craved was the oblivion of sleep, a respite from the endless parade of forgotten lives she handled daily. Her eyes drifted shut, and the edges of consciousness began to blur. The mundane worries of a day, a difficult customer, a misplaced first edition, slowly fading into the periphery. But the descent into slumber was not smooth. It snagged, caught on an invisible thread of discomfort. A prickling sensation danced across her skin, as if unseen eyes were tracing her form beneath the covers. The sound of the rain outside seemed to intensify, morphing from a gentle rhythm into a more insistent drumming, almost frantic. The air in the room grew colder, a subtle chill that seeped through the layers of her quilt. Then it struck. A crushing weight slammed down on Amelia's chest, stealing her breath, pinning her to the mattress as if an invisible entity had decided to make its presence known. Her eyes snapped open in the suffocating darkness, wide with a terror that transcended mere nightmare. She tried to inhale, to draw a desperate gulp of air into her burning lungs, but her body remained stubbornly unresponsive, locked in a vice-like grip she couldn't understand. She willed her limbs to move, to flail against the unseen oppressor, to scream out for help that wouldn't come. But her muscles refused to obey, heavy and inert. Panic clawed at the edges of her awareness, a frantic bird beating against the bars of its cage. She was trapped, utterly and terrifyingly trapped within her own flesh, a silent observer in her own paralyzed body. The familiar comfort of her bedroom had transformed into a suffocating prison. And then she saw it. In the deepest corner of the room, where the shadows cast by the salt lamp seemed to pool and congeal, a form began to materialize. It was tall, impossibly tall, its indistinct silhouette stretching toward the low ceiling of the attic room, a stark column of absolute darkness against the slightly lighter gloom. Its edges were blurred, ill-defined, like smoke given a malevolent shape, yet its presence was undeniable, radiating an aura of cold, predatory stillness. Amelia's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the silence of her paralyzed state. Her blood ran cold, a glacial river flowing through her veins. Though she couldn't discern any features, no eyes, no mouth, she felt a profound sense of being watched, a focused, intent gaze emanating from the shadowy figure. It stood motionless, a silent sentinel in the corner, yet stillness held a palpable tension, a sense of lurking intent that sent shivers down her spine despite her inability to physically react. Then the shadow moved. A long, gaunt arm, unnaturally elongated and thin, extended from the darkness, its movement slow and deliberate, like a tendril reaching out to ensnare its prey. Amelia strained her immobile eyes, desperately trying to understand its purpose, but her neck was locked, refusing to obey her frantic mental commands. All she could do was watch in helpless terror as the shadowy hand seemed to begin exploring the cluttered surface of her antique dresser, its dark form obscuring the familiar shapes of her jewelry box and framed photographs. Faint rustling sounds, barely perceptible above the drumming rain, drifted across the room, each tiny noise amplifying the growing horror. Amelia couldn't identify the source, the soft scrape of unseen fingers against wood, the almost silent shifting of small objects. Her imagination, fueled by fear, conjured images of unseen hands rifling through her most personal belongings, violating the sanctity of her private space. A profound sense of helplessness washed over her, a suffocating wave of despair. She wanted to scream, to shatter the oppressive silence with a desperate cry for help, but her vocal cords remained stubbornly locked, her voice trapped within the confines of a paralyzed body. She willed her limbs to fight, to break free from the invisible bonds that held her captive, but they remained heavy and unresponsive. All she could do was lie there, a terrified spectator, as the tall, dark figure continued its silent, unsettling exploration of her room. Time seemed to stretch and distort, each agonizing second feeling like an eternity. The fear burrowed deep, a primal instinct screaming for escape from a threat she couldn't comprehend. What was this thing? What did it want? Why was it here in her room in the dead of night? Then, as suddenly as it had descended, the crushing weight on Amelia's chest began to lift. The suffocating pressure eased, and the icy grip that held her body captive began to loosen. Her breath returned, shallow and shaky at first, but gradually deepening, becoming more regular. The paralysis receded, first in her extremities, a twitch of a finger, a slight movement of her toes, and then slowly spreading through her limbs. She squeezed her eyes shut, drawing in a deep, shuddering breath. Tried to anchor herself in the reality of her returning senses. It had to have been sleep paralysis, a terrifying but ultimately harmless glitch in the complex machinery of sleep. The shadow, the feeling of being watched, all just vivid hallucinations conjured by a mind caught between worlds. Slowly, cautiously, Amelia opened her eyes. The familiar amber glow of the salt lamp still cast its dancing shadows on the walls. The rhythmic drumming of the rain had softened to a more comforting patter. Everything appeared normal. The mundane objects of her bedroom, the stack of books on her nightstand, the worn armchair in the corner, reassuringly present. There was no towering dark figure, no unsettling rustling sounds. She exhaled a shaky sigh, a wave of relief washing over her. It had just been a bad dream, a particularly vivid and terrifying episode of sleep paralysis. She closed her eyes again, the lingering fear slowly beginning to recede, replaced by a profound exhaustion. But then a small, incongruous detail snagged her returning consciousness. The window beside her bed, the one she distinctly remembered leaving slightly ajar for fresh air, was now open wider than she could have possibly left it. A cool draft wafted into the room, carrying the damp scent of the rain-soaked night. A fresh wave of unease, different from the paralyzing terror a moment ago. This was a creeping suspicion, a prickling sense that something was fundamentally wrong, began to spread through Amelia. She sat up abruptly in bed, her heart resuming its frantic rhythm. She remembered her routine before sleep with a clarity that bordered on obsessive. She had cracked the window open just an inch or two, enough for a gentle breeze. She was certain of it. She always was careful with the old, temperamental window latch. So why was it now open so wide? Wide enough for someone to... The thought sent a fresh jolt of fear through her. Could the sleep paralysis have been more than just a trick of her mind? Could it have been a period of helpless vulnerability during which something or someone had entered her room? Amelia swung her legs over the side of the bed, her bare feet landing softly on the cool wooden floor. She moved toward the window, her steps hesitant, her senses on high alert. The rain had stopped completely now, leaving profound silence in its wake, a silence that felt heavy and expectant. She reached the window and peered out into the darkness. The backyard was shrouded in shadow, the familiar shapes of the overgrown rose bushes and the old oak tree barely discernible. There were no visible footprints in the damp earth beneath the window, no signs of anyone having been there. Her gaze drifted back to the window itself. The latch, old and slightly stiff, was now fully disengaged. She distinctly remembered ensuring it was at least partially secured. A knot of fear tightened in her stomach. This wasn't right. This wasn't just a bad dream or a trick of the mind. Something had happened. Amelia moved slowly towards her closet, her gaze fixed on the closed door. She distinctly remembered closing it before getting into bed, a habit ingrained since childhood. She didn't like the feeling of the open space, the potential for unseen things lurking within. But as she drew closer, she noticed it. The closet door, the old wooden panel with its slightly tarnished brass handle, was now ajar, just a sliver, a dark line bisecting the muted light of the room, but undeniably open, her breath hitched in her throat. The open window, the open closet door, it couldn't be a coincidence. She reached out a trembling hand and pushed the closet door open wider. The interior was swallowed by darkness. The familiar scent of cedar and old clothes doing little to dispel the growing unease. She fumbled for her phone on the nightstand, its cool weight a small comfort in her trembling hand, and activated the flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the familiar contents of her closet. Her neatly hung dresses, the stacks of folded sweaters, the worn leather boots on the floor. Everything appeared to be in its place. There was no sign of anyone hiding, no indication of forced entry. But then, her gaze fell upon a small, unsettling detail. A small antique music box, a gift from her grandmother, which she always kept carefully tucked away on the top shelf, was now sitting precariously on the edge of a lower shelf, as if it had been moved in haste. A cold dread washed over Amelia. She remembered placing it carefully on the top shelf just that afternoon, its delicate mechanism a reminder of cherished memories. It couldn't have simply fallen. She swept the beam of her flashlight across the rest of the closet. Nothing else seemed obviously disturbed, but the misplaced music box was a silent, chilling testament to the fact that something had been amiss while she lay paralyzed in her bed. Amelia backed away from the closet, the beam of her flashlight dancing nervously across the room. The open window, the open closet door, the misplaced music box. The pieces were beginning to form a terrifying, illogical whole. Could the shadowy figure she'd seen during her sleep paralysis have been real? Could it have moved around her room while she was trapped, unable to move or scream? The thought felt insane, a descent into the realm of the supernatural. Yet the physical anomalies in her room seemed to lend it a horrifying credence. She moved to the bedroom door, her hand trembling as she reached for the doorknob. She distinctly remembered locking it before going to sleep, another ingrained habit born of living alone in an old house. She turned the knob. It was unlocked. A gasp escaped her lips. She was certain she had locked it. Absolutely certain. The unlocked door, combined with the open window and the open closet, sent a fresh wave of panic crashing over her. This wasn't just a bad dream. Someone had been in her room. But how? There were no signs of forced entry on the window or the door. Amelia's mind raced, desperately searching for a logical explanation. Had she sleepwalked? Had she somehow opened the window and the closet door in a semi-conscious state? The idea felt absurd. She had never sleepwalked in her life. The only other explanation was far more terrifying. She thought back to the towering shadow in the corner, the feeling of being watched, the rustling sounds near her dresser. Could it have been real? Could some unseen entity have been in her room, its dark presence leaving these subtle, unsettling traces? A shiver ran down her spine, a cold that had nothing to do with the night air. The rational part of her brain screamed for a logical explanation, but the growing fear in her heart whispered of something far more sinister. Amelia moved through her small apartment, checking the locks on the front door, the windows in the living room and kitchen. Everything else was secure. The anomalies were confined to her bedroom, to the space where she had been most vulnerable. She felt a profound sense of violation, a chilling awareness that her sanctuary had been breached, her personal space invaded by something unseen, something unknown. She knew she couldn't stay in the apartment alone tonight. The fear was too potent, the sense of unease too overwhelming. She needed to talk to someone who could offer support and perhaps a more rational perspective. She reached for her phone again, her fingers hovering over the contact for her best friend, Liam. He was a pragmatic, no-nonsense kind of guy, but he was also fiercely protective of her. As she waited for him to answer, Amelia's gaze drifted back to her bedroom door, now standing slightly ajar, mirroring the unsettling openness of the closet. The cool draft from the window seemed to carry a whisper, a silent invitation into the unknown. The question that had been a hesitant tendril of fear now solidified into a chilling certainty. This wasn't just a trick of her mind. Something had been in her room, and the open door felt like a lingering reminder of its presence, a silent testament to the vulnerability she had experienced in the grip of the night. The weight of the night had lifted from her chest, but a far heavier weight now settled in her soul, the chilling dread of the unknown that had crossed the threshold of her open door. Liam arrived quickly, his brow furrowed with concern as he took in Amelia's pale face and the nervous energy that vibrated around her. He didn't dismiss her fears, listening intently as she recounted the terrifying sleep paralysis, the shadowy figure, and the inexplicable state of her bedroom. He methodically checked the window and closet latches, the bedroom door lock, his practical mind searching for any sign of forced entry or a logical explanation. "There's nothing, Amelia," he said finally, his voice calm but serious. "No broken glass, no pry marks. The locks are all intact." His words, meant to be reassuring, only amplified Amelia's unease. If there was no physical intrusion, then what had happened? Liam stayed with her for the rest of the night, sitting in the armchair in her living room while Amelia, despite her exhaustion, found sleep elusive. Every creak of the old house, every rustle of leaves outside, sent a fresh wave of anxiety through her. The image of the towering shadow in the corner of her room remained stubbornly vivid, a chilling imprint on her mind. The next morning, fueled by lukewarm coffee and a shared sense of unease, they conducted another, more thorough search of Amelia's attic bedroom. Liam, with his more objective perspective, examined every nook and cranny. They checked the dusty corners of the closet, the narrow space under the eaves, even the access panel to the crawl space behind the far wall. They found nothing out of the ordinary, just the accumulated dust and forgotten relics of an old house. Maybe it was just a really bad episode of sleep paralysis. "Amelia," Liam suggested gently, running a hand through his messy hair. "Sometimes they can feel incredibly real. And you were probably just disoriented when you woke up and didn't remember leaving the window or closet slightly open." Amelia wanted to believe him. The rational part of her yearned for a logical explanation that would banish the creeping dread. But the memory of the music box, moved from its secure spot on the top shelf, remained a stubborn contradiction to Liam's theory. "But the music box, Liam," she insisted, her voice barely a whisper. "I always keep it on the top shelf. There's no way it could have fallen down there on its own." Liam frowned, his gaze thoughtful. He remembered Amelia's meticulous nature, her almost ritualistic way of arranging her belongings. The misplaced music box did seem odd. "Okay," he conceded, "that is strange. But maybe you moved it recently and just don't remember?" Amelia shook her head firmly. "No, I haven't touched it in weeks." The impasse hung between them, a silent acknowledgement that something unexplained had occurred. Liam, ever the pragmatist, suggested she change her locks and install a security system, measures that would at least offer a sense of control and security, even if they didn't explain the events of the night. Over the next few days, Amelia went through the motions of her life, but shadow of fear lingered over everything. The familiar comfort of her home had been tainted, replaced by a subtle paranoia. Every time she entered her bedroom, she felt a prickling sensation, a feeling of unseen eyes watching her. She double-checked the window and closet doors multiple times before sleep, the simple act now imbued with a nervous ritual. She found herself thinking about the history of her old house, a rambling Victorian that had stood on the hill overlooking the town for over a century. She knew little about its previous occupants, only that it had passed through several hands over the years. Could there be some lingering energy, some unseen presence tied to the old walls? The thought, once relegated to the realm of ghost stories, now felt disturbingly plausible. One evening, while dusting the bookshelves in the antique store, Amelia's gaze fell upon a worn volume titled Local Folklore and Legends. On a whim, she pulled it from the shelf and flipped through its brittle pages. Her fingers traced faded ink that spoke of old tales, strange occurrences, and local superstitions. As she delved deeper into the book, a particular chapter caught her eye: The Slumbering Shadow, Tales of Sleep Paralysis and Unseen Visitations. The stories recounted by the local inhabitants over generations echoed her own terrifying experience with unsettling accuracy. There were tales of crushing weight on the chest, of shadowy figures lurking in the darkness, and of strange occurrences in the hours between wakefulness and sleep. Some attributed these experiences to restless spirits, others to the tricks of a tired mind. One particular anecdote chilled her to the bone. It spoke of a woman who had experienced recurring sleep paralysis and witnessed a tall, dark figure standing in the corner of her room. After these episodes, she would often find small objects in her room inexplicably moved, just slightly out of place. The story ended with the woman moving out of the house, unable to bear the feeling of being watched by something unseen. Amelia closed the book, her hands trembling, The local folklore, once dismissed as quaint old wives' tales, now resonated with a terrifying familiarity. Could there be something more to her experience than just a neurological glitch? Driven by a need to understand, to find some explanation for the unsettling events, Amelia began to delve deeper into the phenomenon of sleep paralysis. She spent hours online, reading articles and forums, connected with others who had experienced similar terrors. She learned about the science behind it. The disruption of REM sleep, the brain struggled to fully awaken while the body remains paralyzed. But amidst the scientific explanations, she also found countless accounts of shadowy figures, of a malevolent presence felt during the episodes. Many described the same feeling of being watched, the same sense of dread that had gripped her, and some, like the woman in the folklore book, spoke of strange occurrences after waking, moved objects, unexplained noises. The more she researched, the more conflicted Amelia felt. Part of her clung to the scientific explanations, desperate to find a rational basis for her fear. But the other part, the part that felt the crushing weight on her chest and seen the towering shadow, couldn't dismiss the unsettling similarities in the experiences of others. Days turned into a week, and the initial shock began to subside, replaced by a persistent unease. Amelia had changed her locks, and Liam had helped her install a basic security system with sensors on her doors and windows. While it offered a degree of reassurance, it didn't address the chilling feeling that lingered in her bedroom, the sense that she wasn't entirely alone. One quiet afternoon, while tidying her bedroom, Amelia noticed something she had overlooked in her initial frantic search. Tucked away under the edge of her rug, near the closet, was a small, dark feather. It wasn't the soft, downy feather of a bird she recognized. This one was sharp, almost black, with a strange, iridescent sheen. Amelia carefully picked it up, a fresh wave of goosebumps prickling her skin. It felt unnatural. It didn't belong in her room. She placed the feather in a small, clear plastic bag, a tangible piece of the puzzle, however small and unsettling. The misplaced music box, the unlocked door, the open window, and now this strange feather. Each anomaly, while seemingly insignificant on its own, contributed to a growing sense that something had indeed crossed the threshold of her open door that night. The logical part of her mind struggled to connect these disparate details to a rational explanation, but the primal fear that still lingered whispered of a different kind of intrusion, a presence that operated outside the realm of the physical, leaving behind these subtle, unsettling echoes of its visit. Amelia knew she couldn't ignore these signs. The sleep paralysis had been terrifying, but the events that followed, the subtle violations of her personal space, were far more disturbing. The open door wasn't just a memory. It felt like an invitation, a lingering connection to something unseen that had entered her world during the vulnerable hours of the night. And she couldn't shake the chilling feeling that it might return. The discovery of the dark feather sent a fresh wave of disquiet through Amelia. Unlike the subtle unease that had lingered in the days following her terrifying sleep paralysis, this tangible object felt like a concrete link to the unsettling events, a physical manifestation of the unseen presence she couldn't shake. She showed it to Liam, who examined it with a perplexed frown. "It's unusual," he admitted, turning the feather over in his fingers. "I don't recognize it. It's not from any bird I've ever seen around here." They tried to identify the feather online, scrolling through countless images of different bird species, but none matched its peculiar dark sheen and sharp, almost brittle texture. The inability to identify it only deepened the mystery, adding another layer of the inexplicable to the already unsettling situation. Driven by a growing need for answers that transcended the scientific explanations of sleep paralysis, Amelia decided to delve deeper into the history of her old house. She visited the local historical society, a dusty repository of old documents, photographs, and local lore. Mrs. Gable, the elderly historian with a passion for the town's past, greeted her with a warm smile and a genuine interest in her inquiry. Amelia explained that she was researching the history of her Victorian home on Hemlock Hill, hoping to learn more about its previous occupants. Mrs. Gable's eyes lit up, and she led Amelia to a dimly lit back room filled with stacks of yellowed records. "Ah, the old Ainsworth place," Mrs. Gable said, her voice a low murmur as she pulled out a thick leather-bound ledger. "A grand house with a long history. Let's see. Hours passed as Amelia pored over the faded entries, tracing the lineage of the house through generations of families. She learned about the Ainsworths, the original owners who had built the house in the late 19th century, their lives intertwined with the growth and changes of the town. She read about subsequent owners, their joys and sorrows etched in the spidery handwriting of the past. But it was a particular entry, tucked away in a section detailing the early 20th century, that made Amelia's blood run cold. It spoke of a young man named Elias Thorne, a reclusive artist who had lived in the house alone for several years. The entry described him as a troubled soul, plagued by night terrors and visions in the darkness. It mentioned whispers among the townsfolk of strange occurrences in the house, of unsettling shadows seen in windows, and a pervasive feeling of unease surrounding the property. The entry also noted Elias Thorne's untimely death in the house, attributed to a sudden and unexplained heart failure. The date of his passing was decades ago, but the chilling parallels between his experiences and her own were undeniable. The night terrors, the visions in the darkness, the unsettling atmosphere surrounding the house, it all resonated with the fear that had taken root in Amelia's heart. Amelia shared her findings with Liam, who listened with a growing sense of gravity. While still hesitant to embrace the supernatural, even he couldn't dismiss the striking similarities. "It's a disturbing coincidence, Amelia," he conceded, his brow furrowed. "But it doesn't necessarily mean it's a ghost or anything like that." "But what else could it be, Liam?" Amelia argued, her voice filled with a desperate plea for understanding. "The sleep paralysis, the shadow figure, the moved objects, the open door, and now this man who lived in my very room, experiencing the same terrifying things?" Liam remained silent for a long moment, his gaze distant. "I don't know, Amelia. I honestly don't. But I think you should be careful. Maybe you should consider having the house looked at." His suggestion, though vague, hinted at a possibility Amelia had already begun to consider. If there was a lingering presence in her home, a residual energy from the troubled past, she needed to understand it, to find a way to either dispel it or learn to live with it. Amelia contacted a local paranormal investigator, a woman named Sarah Chun, who had a reputation for being both thorough and discreet. Sarah arrived at Amelia's house one crisp autumn afternoon, her demeanor calm and professional, her eyes sharp and observant as she surveyed the old Victorian. Sarah spent hours in Amelia's bedroom, taking EMF readings, checking for temperature fluctuations, and simply observing the atmosphere of the room. She asked Amelia detailed questions about her experiences, her sleep patterns, and the layout of the house. She listened patiently as Amelia recounted the terrifying sleep paralysis, the shadowy figure, and the strange occurrences that followed. Sleep paralysis itself is a well-documented phenomenon, Sarah explained, her voice measured. But the visual and sensory experiences that often accompany it can be very real and very frightening for the individual. The feeling of a presence, the shadowy figures, these are common elements reported by many. But what about the open door, the moved objects? Amelia pressed, holding up the small plastic bag containing the dark feather. Sarah examined the feather with a thoughtful expression. "This is unusual. As Liam said, it doesn't look like any local bird. We can have it analyzed if you like." Over the next few days, Sarah conducted a more in-depth investigation of the house, using specialized equipment to detect any unusual energy fields or anomalies. She also researched the history of the house independently, corroborating the information Amelia had found about Elias Thorne. Her findings were inconclusive. While she detected some minor EMF fluctuations in Amelia's bedroom, they were within normal ranges for an old house with aging wiring. There were no significant temperature drops or other telltale signs of a strong paranormal presence. However, Sarah acknowledged the striking parallels between Amelia's experiences and those attributed to Elias Thorne. She suggested that perhaps the house held some residual emotional energy, a lingering echo of his troubled existence that could be influencing Amelia's sleep state and perceptions. "It's possible that you are particularly sensitive to these kinds of energies, Amelia," Sarah explained. "Old houses often hold on to the emotions and experiences of their past inhabitants. It's not necessarily a haunting in traditional sense, but more like a resonance." Sarah recommended some grounding techniques, suggesting Amelia create a more calming and protective atmosphere in her bedroom. She advised her to clear the space energetically, using practices like smudging with sage or playing calming frequencies. She also suggested keeping a detailed journal of her experiences, noting the time, the specific sensations, and any environmental factors that might be relevant. Amelia followed Sarah's advice diligently. She smudged her bedroom with sage, the fragrant smoke filling the air and carrying with it a sense of cleansing. She played calming nature sounds as she fell asleep and kept a journal by her bedside, meticulously documenting her dreams and any unusual sensations she experienced. For a while, the unsettling occurrences seemed to subside. Amelia's sleep became less disturbed, and the feeling of being watched in her bedroom lessened. She began to hope that Sarah's suggestions had worked, that the residual energy of the past was finally fading. But then, the subtle signs began again. A book on her nightstand, which she was certain she had placed face down, would be found open in the morning. A small trinket on her dresser would be inexplicably moved a few inches. And one morning, she awoke to find her closet door slightly ajar once more, the sliver of darkness a chilling reminder of the terror she had felt. These occurrences were subtle, easily dismissed as tricks of the light or lapses in memory. But for Amelia, they carried a weight of undeniable significance. They were whispers in the silence, faint echoes of the unseen presence that seemed determined to make its presence known. The fear began to creep back, a slow, insidious tendril wrapping around her peace of mind. The safety she had begun to feel in her home was eroding, replaced by a gnawing anxiety. She felt like she was living in a liminal space, a boundary between the waking world and something else, something just beyond her perception. One particularly restless night, Amelia found herself lying awake in the darkness, the silence of her room amplifying the frantic beating of her heart. The rain had returned, a soft, persistent drumming against the roof. She felt a familiar prickling sensation on her skin, the unsettling feeling of being watched. Suddenly, a faint whisper seemed to brush against her ear, a sound so soft it could have been her imagination, but it carried a chillingly familiar quality, a breath of cold air in the stillness. Amelia froze, every muscle in her body tense. She strained her ears, listening intently, but heard nothing more than the rain. But the seed of doubt had been planted. The whisper, however faint, felt like a confirmation of her deepest fears. She wasn't imagining things. There was something else in her room. Driven by a desperate need to understand the nature of this presence, Amelia decided to conduct her own investigation, delving deeper into the history of Elias Thorne. She spent more time at the Historical Society, poring over old newspaper articles and local archives. She discovered that Elias Thorne had been a gifted but troubled artist, his work often depicting dark and unsettling imagery. He had been a solitary figure, estranged from his family and largely isolated from the town. The newspaper articles surrounding his death painted a picture of a man consumed by his inner demons, his final years marked by increasing paranoia and claims of shadows that haunted his waking hours and tormented his sleep. One article mentioned a series of disturbing sketches found in his room after his death, depicting tall, gaunt figures lurking in the corners of dimly lit spaces. The descriptions bore an uncanny resemblance to the shadowy figure Amelia had seen during her sleep paralysis. Amelia also learned that Elias Thorne had been deeply fascinated by local folklore and superstitions, particularly the old tales of sleep paralysis and nocturnal visitations. He had even written a series of unpublished stories exploring these themes, his troubled mind seemingly drawn to the darker aspects of the human experience. The more Amelia learned about Elias Thorne, the more convinced she became that his troubled spirit was somehow connected to the unsettling occurrences in her house. His own experiences mirrored hers with an unnerving accuracy, suggesting a lingering presence, an echo of his tormented past that had somehow imprinted itself on the very fabric of the house. The dark feather, she now suspected, might be more than just an unusual object. Perhaps it was a symbolic remnant, a tangible link to Elias Thorne's artistic obsession with the shadowy figures that haunted his own life. Armed with this newfound understanding, Amelia knew she couldn't simply try to cleanse the house or ignore the subtle signs. She felt a strange sense of connection to Elias Thorne, a shared experience of terror that transcended time. She needed to understand his torment, to perhaps find a way to bring peace to his restless spirit, and in doing so, perhaps find peace for herself. Amelia decided to try and connect with Elias Thorne through his art. She sought out any surviving examples of his work, hoping to find clues or insights into the nature of the shadows that had plagued him. She contacted local antique dealers and art collectors, asking if they had any paintings or sketches by Elias Thorne. After several inquiries, she managed to track down a small collection of his sketches that were being held in the archives of the local art museum. The curator, a kind and understanding woman named Ms. Albright, allowed Amelia to view them. As Amelia carefully turned the brittle pages of the sketchbook, she was struck by the raw emotion and unsettling imagery of Elias Thorne's work. His sketches were filled with distorted figures, shadowy landscapes, and a pervasive sense of dread. And there, in several of the drawings, were the tall, gaunt figures she had seen during her sleep paralysis, lurking in corners, their presence radiating a palpable sense of menace. One sketch in particular caught her eye. It depicted a dimly lit bedroom, the furniture casting long, distorted shadows. In the far corner stood a tall, dark figure, its form indistinct but undeniably present. And near the bed, the bedroom door was depicted slightly ajar. A chill ran down Amelia's spine. The drawing was an almost perfect representation of her own terrifying experience. It felt like a message across time, a visual echo of the torment that had haunted Elias Thorne and now seemed to be reaching out to her. Clutched in the sketchbook was a small, folded piece of paper. Amelia carefully unfolded it, her heart pounding in her chest. It was a short, handwritten note, the ink faded but still legible. They come in the stillness when the veil thins, the shadows at the edge of sight, the weight upon the chest. They whisper the open door, the passage between worlds. I see them, always watching, always waiting. The note sent a shiver of understanding through Amelia. Elias Thorne hadn't just experienced sleep paralysis. He perceived it as something more, a thinning of the veil between worlds, a time when unseen entities could cross over. The open door wasn't just a physical detail. It was a symbolic gateway in his tormented mind. Amelia now understood. The unsettling occurrences in her house weren't random. They were echoes of Elias Thorne's fear, residual imprints of his belief in the reality of the shadows that plagued him. The open door, the moved objects, even the dark feather, perhaps a symbolic representation of the shadowy figures he drew, were all manifestations of his lingering presence, his fear reaching out across time. The realization wasn't comforting, but it brought a strange sense of clarity. The terror she had felt wasn't just a product of her own mind. It was intertwined with the tormented history of her house, with the lingering fear of the man who had died in her very room. Amelia knew what she had to do. She couldn't simply try to banish Elias Thorne's presence. She needed to acknowledge his suffering, to understand his fear, and perhaps, finally, to offer him peace. The open door was an invitation to terror. It was a symbol of a lingering connection, a bridge across time that needed to be mended. Her journey had just begun. Armed with the chilling insights from Elias Thorne's note and sketches, Amelia felt a shift in her fear. It was no longer a nameless dread, but more focused understanding of the lingering presence in her home. The terror hadn't vanished entirely, but it was now tinged with a sense of empathy for the troubled artist who had experienced similar horrors within the same walls. The open door, once a symbol of inexplicable intrusion, now felt like a fragile boundary, a point of connection between her world and his tormented past. Amelia decided to create a space of peace and remembrance within her bedroom, a sanctuary where Elias Thorne's residual energy might find solace. She cleared a small corner of the room, near the window where the unsettling draft had often lingered. She placed a small table there and adorned it with items she felt might resonate with his artistic spirit. A smooth piece of driftwood she found on a recent trip to the coast, a collection of smooth river stones, and a single white candle. She also placed a copy of his sketchbook beside these objects, hoping to create a focal point for his lingering energy. She spent time in this corner each day, sitting quietly, focusing on feelings of peace and acceptance. She spoke softly, acknowledging Elias Thorne's presence and expressing her understanding of the fear he must have endured. She spoke of the beauty she found in the world, the comfort of connection, and the hope for peace that transcends suffering. It felt strange at first, talking to an unseen presence. But as the days passed, a subtle shift began to occur in the atmosphere of her room. The oppressive feeling seemed to lessen, and the shadows in the corners didn't feel quite so menacing. Amelia also continued her research into Elias Thorne's life, hoping to uncover more about his personal struggles and perhaps find a way to honor his memory. She discovered that he had been deeply attached to a particular melody, a haunting folk tune that his mother used to sing to him. Amelia managed to find a recording of the song in the Historical Society's archives. She began to play it softly in her bedroom, especially during the evenings, hoping the familiar melody might bring him some comfort. One evening, as the melancholic notes of the folk tune filled the room, Amelia felt a distinct change in the atmosphere. A gentle warmth seemed to emanate from the corner she had dedicated to Elias Thorne. The air felt lighter, less heavy. For the first time in weeks, she slept through the entire night, without waking with a start or feeling the oppressive weight on her chest. The subtle occurrences continued, but they seemed to take on a different quality. The book on her nightstand might still be found open, but it would be open to a page featuring a beautiful landscape or a peaceful scene. The trinket on her dresser might be moved, but it would be placed close to the collection of river stones, as if drawn to their natural simplicity. Even the closet door, on the rare occasion she found it ajar, seemed to emit a sense of quiet curiosity rather than malevolent intent. Amelia began to perceive these subtle shifts not as acts of terror, but as tentative attempts at communication, faint echoes of a troubled spirit reaching out across the veil. The open door no longer felt like a gateway to fear, but a potential opening for connection, a space where understanding might blossom. However, the dark feather remained a persistent enigma, a tangible reminder of the darker aspects of Elias Thorne's torment. Amelia couldn't shake the feeling that it held a deeper significance, a key to understanding the more menacing aspects of the shadow figures that had haunted him. She decided to consult with Sarah again, hoping the paranormal investigator might offer a new perspective on the strange feather. Sarah examined it carefully under a magnifying glass, her expression thoughtful. "We had it analyzed," Sarah said, her voice low. "The composition is unusual. It's not avian. It seems to be made of a keratinous material, similar to a feather, but the structure and pigmentation are unlike anything found in nature." Amelia's blood ran cold. "So, it's not from an animal?" Sarah shook her head slowly. "Not that we can identify. It's almost artificial, yet there's an organic quality to it. It's quite perplexing." The mystery of the feather deepened, suggesting that perhaps the shadows Elias Thorne had seen, and the one Amelia had witnessed during her sleep paralysis, were not merely figments of a troubled mind. The tangible nature of the feather hinted at something more, something that defied easy explanation. Driven by this unsettling discovery, Amelia delved back into Elias Thorne's sketches, focusing specifically on the depictions of the shadowy figures. She noticed recurring details she had previously overlooked. In many of the drawings, the figures were depicted with what appeared to be dark, sharp protrusions extending from their backs, resembling feathers. A chilling realization dawned on Amelia. The dark feather wasn't just a random object. It might be a physical remnant, a tangible piece of the entities that had haunted Elias Thorne's nightmares and perhaps still lingered in the house. The shift in her perception of the open door became more profound. If these shadowy figures were more than just psychological manifestations, then the slightly ajar door could indeed be a symbolic or even literal opening, a point of entry for something from beyond. The sense of connection she had begun to feel for Elias Thorne was now tinged with a renewed sense of fear. If his torment had been rooted in something external, something real, then her own experiences were potentially far more dangerous than she had initially imagined. Amelia knew she needed to understand the nature of these shadowy entities. If they were drawn to the house, perhaps linked to Elias Thorne's tormented past, then she needed to find a way to sever that connection. To protect herself and her home, she reached out to Sarah again, this time sharing her new insights about the feather and its potential connection to the figures in Elias Thorne's sketches. Sarah listened intently, her professional skepticism giving way to a more serious concern. "This changes things," Sarah admitted, her brow furrowed. "If these figures are more than just visual hallucinations, then we need to approach this differently." Sarah brought in a colleague, a seasoned paranormal investigator named Ben Carter, who specialized in more intense cases. Ben was a quiet, intense man with a wealth of experience in dealing with potentially negative entities. He listened to Amelia's story and examined the feather and the sketches with a grave expression. "The recurring imagery of the feather is significant," Ben said, his voice low and serious. "It suggests a potential link to something darker. Sleep paralysis can open a vulnerability, a window through which certain entities might be able to manifest or exert influence." Ben conducted more rigorous investigation of the house, focusing on areas where Amelia had experienced the strongest feelings of unease and where the shadowy figure had appeared. He used specialized equipment designed to detect not just electromagnetic fields, but also subtle shifts in energy that might indicate a non-physical presence. During one of their investigations in Amelia's bedroom, Ben's equipment registered a sudden and significant energy spike in a corner where the shadowy figure had appeared. The temperature in that area also dropped noticeably, despite the central heating. "Something is definitely drawn to this corner," Ben said, his voice low. "The energy signature is negative." Ben explained that some entities, particularly those feeding on fear and negative emotions, could become attached to places where intense suffering had occurred. Elias Thorne's tormented existence and his fear of the shadows might have inadvertently created an anchor, drawing these entities to the house. The open door, Ben suggested, could be more than just symbolic. It might be a focal point, a place where the veil between worlds was thinner, allowing these entities easier access. Ben recommended a series of protective rituals and energy clearings, more potent than the simple smudging Amelia had done. He also advised her to focus her own energy and intent on creating a strong shield of positive energy around herself and her home. Amelia, now facing the very real possibility of a malevolent presence in her house, followed Ben's instructions with unwavering determination. She participated in the cleansing rituals, her voice joining Ben's in ancient chants meant to dispel negative energies. She visualized a bright, protective light surrounding her home, a shield against the darkness. She also decided to close the open door, both literally and symbolically. She made a conscious effort to always keep her bedroom windows securely latched and her closet door firmly closed. The corner she had dedicated to Elias Thorne remained a place of peace and remembrance, but she now focused her intentions on severing connection to the negative entities that might be drawn to his lingering fear. The following nights were filled with a tense anticipation. Amelia slept with the lights on, her senses on high alert. She kept a journal by her bedside, noting every sound, every shadow, every flicker of unease. For a while, the activity seemed to lessen. The oppressive feeling in her bedroom dissipated, and the subtle movements of objects ceased. Amelia began to hope that their efforts were working, that the negative presence was finally receding. But then, one night, the terror returned with vengeance. Amelia awoke in the dead of night, the familiar crushing weight pressing down on her chest. The paralysis gripped her, rendering her utterly helpless. And in the corner of her room, the towering shadow had returned, its form more defined, more menacing than before. This time, she could almost make out gaunt features, empty sockets where eyes should have been, a silent, gaping maw. And from its back, dark, sharp protrusions extended, chillingly resembling the strange feather. The shadow seemed to glide across the room, its movement silent but purposeful. Amelia watched in frozen terror as it approached her bed, its unseen gaze seeming to pierce through her very soul. A wave of icy dread washed over her, so intense it felt like a physical blow. Then, the shadow reached out a long, skeletal hand, its touch feeling like the cold caress of death. Amelia tried to scream, but no sound escaped her paralyzed throat. Just as the shadowy hand was about to touch her, Amelia focused all her will, all her fear, all her desperate desire to survive. She visualized the bright, protective light Ben had taught her to create, imagining it radiating outwards from her very core, pushing back the darkness. A jolt of energy surged through her, and the crushing weight on her chest momentarily lessened. The shadow recoiled slightly, its form flickering as if disturbed by an unseen force. Amelia seized the opportunity. With a Herculean effort, she broke free from paralysis, gasping for breath as she thrashed against the covers. She scrambled out of bed, her heart pounding in her chest, her eyes fixed on the corner where the shadow had stood. It was gone. The room was silent. the only sound her ragged breathing. The salt lamp cast its familiar amber glow, the shadows on the walls now benign and ordinary, but the terror lingered, a cold residue clinging to the air. Amelia knew that the encounter had been different this time, more direct, more threatening. The entity, or whatever it was not receding. It was escalating. And then she saw it. The bedroom window, which she had meticulously latched before going to sleep, was now wide open, the cool night air rushing into the room. And on the windowsill, lying starkly against the white frame, was another one of the strange, dark feathers. The message was clear. The open door, the thinning veil, the connection to something dark and persistent. It was all terrifyingly real, and Amelia was now directly in its path. The fight for her home, and perhaps her sanity, had truly begun. The reappearance of the dark feather on the open windowsill, after the terrifyingly direct encounter with the shadow figure, sent a chilling message to Amelia. The entity wasn't just a lingering echo of Elias Thorne's fear. It was something more substantial, something actively trying to breach the boundaries of her world. The open window, despite her careful precautions, felt like a deliberate act, a mocking reminder of her vulnerability. Amelia didn't hesitate. She contacted Ben Carter immediately, her voice trembling as she recounted the night's horrifying events and the ominous return of the feather. Ben's usual calm demeanor shifted to one of grave concern. "This is serious, Amelia," he said, his voice low and urgent. "It's clear that this entity is growing stronger or becoming more focused on you. We need to act decisively." Ben returned to Amelia's house that very day, bringing with him a collection of more potent protective tools and ritualistic implements. He explained that they needed to create a powerful barrier, a consecrated space within her bedroom that would repel the negative energy and sever its connection to the house. They spent hours preparing the room. Ben meticulously cleansed every corner with a potent blend of herbs and salts, chanting ancient invocations for protection and banishment. He drew sigils of warding on the walls and windows with consecrated oil, symbols meant to repel malevolent forces. They created a circle of salt around Amelia's bed, a traditional barrier against negative energies. Ben also instructed Amelia on specific visualizations and affirmations, empowering her to actively defend herself and her space. He emphasized the importance of her own will and intent, explaining that her fear was a source of energy for the entity, while her courage and resolve could weaken its hold. That night, Amelia slept within the consecrated circle, a sense of fragile safety surrounding her. The air in the room felt different, charged with a subtle energy. She kept the protective amulet Ben had given her clutched in her hand, its smooth surface a tangible anchor to her resolve. The night passed without incident. Amelia slept fitfully, her senses still on high alert, but the oppressive presence she had felt before was absent. There was no crushing weight, no shadowy figure in the corner. The open window remained securely latched, and no dark feathers appeared. A tentative sense of hope began to bloom within Amelia. Perhaps their efforts were working. Perhaps the barrier they had created was strong enough to keep the darkness at bay. However, Ben cautioned her against complacency. This kind of entity can be persistent, he warned. It may try different ways to reach you, to exploit any weakness in your defenses. We need to remain vigilant. Over the next few weeks, Amelia adhered strictly to Ben's instructions. She maintained the consecrated space in her bedroom, performing daily affirmations and visualizations. She kept a protective amulet with her at all times. She also worked on managing her fear, consciously focusing on feelings of strength and resilience. The overt manifestations, the shadow figure, the crushing weight, did not return. The subtle occurrences also seemed to cease. The moved object stayed in place, and the closet door remained firmly shut. The only lingering reminder was the unsettling image of the dark feather, which Amelia kept safely contained, a tangible piece of the puzzle they still didn't fully understand. Amelia began to feel a sense of reclaiming her home, of pushing back against the darkness that had invaded her sanctuary. The fear hadn't entirely vanished, but it was now a dull ache in the background, no longer the all-consuming terror that had gripped her. However, the silence felt uneasy, like the lull before a storm. Amelia couldn't shake the feeling that the entity was merely dormant, waiting for an opportunity to resurface. one particularly stormy night. As the wind howled outside and the rain lashed against the windows, Amelia awoke to a strange sound. It wasn't the familiar creaking of the old house in the wind, but a soft, rhythmic tapping, seemingly coming from within the walls of her bedroom. The sound was faint but persistent, a steady tap, tap, tap that seemed to resonate deep within the structure of the house. Amelia sat up in bed, her heart pounding, her senses on high alert. The protective circle of salt still surrounded her bed, but the storm outside felt like a chaotic energy that might weaken their defenses. The tapping continued, growing slightly louder, as if something was trying to break through the walls. Amelia clutched the amulet tightly, her fear threatening to overwhelm her newfound sense of control. She called Ben, her voice barely above a whisper. He listened intently, his usual calm replaced by a note of urgency. "It's trying to find a way in," he said. "Stay within the circle. Amelia, don't let your fear take hold. I'm on my way." While she waited for Ben, the tapping intensified, moving around the room, seeming to emanate from different walls in turn. Amelia closed her eyes, focusing on her visualizations, picturing protective light surrounding her, pushing back against the intrusive sound. When Ben finally arrived, the tapping abruptly stopped. He moved quickly, his senses sharp, his equipment whirring as he scanned the room. "The energy is agitated," he confirmed, his gaze sweeping across the walls. "It's testing the boundaries." Ben performed a more intense cleansing ritual, his voice resonating with power as he chanted the ancient words of banishment. He reinforced the sigils on the walls and added further layers of protection to the windows and doors. The storm raged outside, mirroring the turbulent energy within the house. Amelia stayed within the salt circle, her fear a tangible presence in the room, but her resolve holding firm. The night passed without further incident, but the experience left Amelia shaken. It was clear that the entity was not easily deterred. It was persistent, intelligent, and actively trying to find a way back into her life. Ben explained that the entity might be drawn to something specific within the house, perhaps something connected to Elias Thorne that they hadn't yet uncovered. He suggested they conduct a more thorough search of the attic, the oldest part of the house, and the room directly above Amelia's bedroom, where Elias Thorne had spent his final years. The attic was a dusty, cluttered space filled with forgotten relics of generations past. Sunlight filtered weakly through the grimy windows, illuminating swirling dust motes and casting long, eerie shadows. The air was thick with the smell of aged wood and decay. As they carefully sifted through forgotten belongings, they discovered a locked wooden chest tucked away in a dark corner. The lock was old and rusted, but it held firm. With a sense of anticipation and trepidation, Ben managed to pry the chest open. Inside, they found a collection of Elias Thorne's personal effects, old journals, bundles of letters, and a small velvet-lined box. Within the box, nestled among yellowed fabric, was a collection of the strange, dark feathers, identical to the ones Amelia had found. There were dozens of them, carefully preserved, as if they held immense significance for Elias Thorne. Beneath the feathers, they found another small, folded piece of paper. Amelia carefully unfolded it, her heart pounding with a sense of foreboding. The handwriting was Elias Thorne's, but the tone was more frantic, more desperate than the previous note. "They are real. They are drawn to the open door, to the places where the veil is thin. The feathers are their mark, their essence. I try to keep them contained, but they whisper in my dreams. They claw at the edges of my sight. The darkness is coming." The discovery of the feathers and the note sent a chilling wave of understanding through Amelia and Ben. Elias Thorne hadn't just been plagued by nightmares. He had believed in the tangible reality of these shadowy entities, viewing the dark feathers as physical evidence of their presence. His attempt to contain them in the chest suggested a desperate struggle to control their influence. Ben theorized that the entity Amelia had encountered might have been drawn to the house through Elias Thorne's fear and belief, the feathers acting as a conduit or anchor. The open door in this context was not just a symbolic gateway, but perhaps a point of weakened energy that allowed the entity to manifest more easily. The solution, Ben explained, might lie in severing the connection to feathers, in disrupting the anchor that tied the entity to the house. Following a complex ritual involving the burning of specific herbs and the recitation of powerful banishing incantations, Ben carefully destroyed the dark feathers in the attic. As the strange material burned, it emitted a faint, acrid odor, and a palpable shift in the energy of the house could be felt. The oppressive atmosphere seemed to lift, replaced by a sense of lightness and clarity. That night, Amelia slept soundly for the first time in weeks. There were no disturbing dreams, no unsettling sounds, no sense of an unseen presence. The open door remained securely latched, and the storm outside had finally passed, leaving behind a sense of cleansed stillness. The following days were marked by a gradual return to normalcy. The fear that had haunted Amelia began to recede, replaced by a sense of peace and empowerment. The subtle occurrences ceased entirely. The house felt like her own again, a sanctuary free from the lingering darkness. Ben remained for a few more days, monitoring the energy of the house and teaching Amelia more advanced protective techniques. He explained that while they had likely severed the immediate connection to the entity, vigilance was still key. The experience had taught her that the boundaries between worlds could be fragile and that negative energy could be drawn to places of fear and suffering. Amelia continued to honor Elias Thorne's memory, keeping the corner in her bedroom as a space of quiet remembrance. She hoped that by understanding his torment and confronting the darkness that had plagued him, she had finally brought some peace to his restless spirit. The open door, once a symbol of terror, now served as a reminder of the vulnerability she had faced and the strength she had found within herself. She learned to trust her instincts, to acknowledge the subtle whispers of unease, and to actively protect her physical and energetic boundaries. Life in the old Victorian on Hemlock Hill slowly returned to a sense of normalcy. The rain still pattered against the attic window, but now it was once again a comforting lullaby. The shadows in the corners remained, but they were just shadows, no longer holding the menacing form of an unseen terror. Amelia never forgot her terrifying experience. It had changed her, making her more aware of the unseen energies that could permeate the world around her, but it also taught her the power of her own will, the importance of facing fear, and the resilience of the human spirit in the face of the unknown. The open door remained a part of her house, but it no longer held the threat of darkness. It was simply a passage, and Amelia had learned how to guard its threshold. The immediate threat had receded, the oppressive darkness seemingly banished from Amelia's home. The days that followed were marked by a welcome sense of peace, a lightness that had been absent for weeks. The old Victorian on Hemlock Hill felt like her sanctuary once more, the familiar creaks and groans no longer carrying an undercurrent of dread. The open door, now always firmly closed and latched, served as a silent testament to the battles she had fought and won. Amelia continued her daily rituals of protection and grounding, a quiet acknowledgement of the unseen energies that surrounded her. The corner dedicated to Elias Thorne remained a space of remembrance, but the focus had shifted from understanding his torment to honoring his memory and ensuring his spirit found lasting peace. She often played the haunting folk tune, imagining it carrying a message of solace into the ether. Life slowly settled back into a rhythm. Amelia found herself sleeping soundly through the night, the fear that clung to her like a shroud finally lifting. She returned to her work at the antique bookstore with a renewed sense of focus, the quiet whispers of history, now a source of comfort rather than a reminder of lingering spirits. However, the experience had undeniably changed her. Amelia found herself more attuned to subtle shifts in the atmosphere, more aware of the play of light and shadow, a fleeting chill in a warm room, an unexplained whisper in the silence. These once innocuous occurrences now held a potential significance, a faint echo of the terror she had endured. Ben Carter stayed in touch, checking in on Amelia regularly. He reiterated the importance of maintaining her protective practices and trusting her intuition. These kinds of attachments can sometimes leave residual traces, he explained. It's unlikely to return in the same way, but being aware is always wise. One crisp autumn afternoon, as Amelia was dusting the antique furniture in her living room, she noticed a small, dark mark on the wooden floor near the doorway, a faint, almost imperceptible smudge that hadn't been there before. It was roughly the size and shape of the strange dark feather. A jolt of unease shot through her. She knelt down, examining the mark closely. It didn't look like dirt or dust. It seemed almost etched into the wood, a subtle discoloration that resisted her attempts to wipe it away. A wave of apprehension washed over her. Could it be a residual trace of the entity? A faint echo of its presence lingering in her home? She immediately contacted Ben, her voice tinged with renewed anxiety. Ben returned to the house, his expression serious as he examined the mark. He used his instruments to scan the area, but detected no unusual energy fluctuations. "It could be nothing, Amelia," he said cautiously. "Just a stain or a discoloration you hadn't noticed before. But given what you've been through, it's understandable that you're concerned." Despite Ben's attempts at reassurance, Amelia couldn't shake the feeling that the mark was significant. It felt like a subtle reminder that the darkness she fought against might not be entirely gone, that a faint echo of its presence still lingered within her walls. She intensified her protective rituals, focusing her intent on cleansing and reinforcing the boundaries of her home. She smudged the entire house with sage, paying particular attention to the area around the dark mark. She visualized a radiant white light emanating from her, filling every corner of the house and pushing back any lingering negativity. The mark remained, a faint but persistent shadow on the wooden floor. Amelia learned to live with it, a constant reminder of the battle she had won and the vigilance she needed to maintain. Months passed, and the overt manifestations did not return. The house settled into a comfortable rhythm once more. Amelia found peace in her daily life, but the memory of the open door and the chilling presence remained a part of her, a subtle undercurrent in the quiet flow of her days. One particularly still winter evening, as Amelia sat by the fire reading, she heard a faint scratching sound coming from within the walls of her bedroom. It was similar to the tapping she had heard before, but softer, more hesitant. A familiar wave of anxiety washed over her. Had the entity returned? Was it trying to breach her defenses once more? She stood up slowly, her heart pounding, and walked towards her bedroom. As she approached the door, the scratching stopped. She listened intently, but heard only the crackling of the fire downstairs and the gentle whisper of the wind outside. She opened the bedroom door cautiously, her senses on high alert. The room was still and silent, bathed in the soft glow of the moonlight filtering through the window. Everything was in its place. The closet door was firmly closed, and the window was securely latched. Amelia scanned the room, her gaze lingering on the corner where the shadow figure had once stood. There was nothing there, just a familiar play of light and shadow. She stood in the doorway for a long moment, listening, waiting, but the scratching did not return. Slowly, cautiously, she entered the room, her protective amulet clutched in her hand. She walked to the wall where she had heard the scratching and pressed her ear against the cold plaster. She heard nothing. After a while, she returned to bed, her mind racing. Was it just her imagination, a lingering echo of her past fear? Or was it a sign that the entity was still present, lurking just beyond her perception? The following days were filled with a subtle unease. Amelia found herself more jumpy, more attuned to every little sound and shadow. She reinforced her protective rituals, but the feeling that she was being watched, however faintly, persisted. She contacted Ben again, describing the scratching sound. He listened patiently, his response cautious. "It could be any number of things in an old house, Amelia," he said. "Settling wood, rodents, but given your history, it's wise to be aware. If it happens again, try to pinpoint the location." The scratching returned sporadically, always faint, always brief. Amelia tried to trace its source, but it seemed to move within the walls, elusive and unsettling. One afternoon, while cleaning her attic, Amelia stumbled upon a small, hidden compartment behind a loose panel in the wall, the same wall that backed onto her bedroom. Inside, she found a small leather-bound journal, its pages filled with Elias Thorne's spidery handwriting. As Amelia carefully read through the journal, she gained a deeper understanding of the artist's tormented mind. He wrote extensively about the shadows that plagued him, not just as visual hallucinations during sleep paralysis, but as entities he believed were real, lurking just beyond the veil of perception. He described hearing faint scratching sounds within the walls, whispers in the darkness, and the constant feeling of being watched. He also wrote about his attempt to understand these entities, his research into local folklore and ancient beliefs. He theorized that they were drawn to places of emotional turmoil, and that his own fear and isolation had somehow amplified their presence. A chilling passage described his attempts to communicate with the entities, believing that understanding their nature might offer a way to appease them. He wrote of leaving small offerings in the attic, hoping to gain their favor or at least deter their malevolent attention. Tucked inside the journal, Amelia found a small, brittle object, a bird's claw, blackened and strangely deformed. A wave of understanding washed over Amelia. The scratching sound, the dark feathers, the persistent feeling of unease. They were all connected to Elias Thorne's tormented belief in his attempt to interact with the entities he perceived. The bird's claw might have been one of his offerings, a misguided attempt to appease the darkness. Amelia realized that the lingering echo in her house wasn't necessarily the entity itself, but a residual imprint of Elias Thorne's fear and his belief in its presence. His tormented energy had somehow permeated the very fabric of the house, leaving behind these unsettling traces. She knew then that her approach needed a shift. Instead of focusing solely on banishing the external entity, she also needed to address the lingering energy of Elias Thorne's fear. Amelia returned to the corner she had dedicated to his memory. She sat quietly, holding his journal, and spoke to his spirit with compassion and understanding. She acknowledged his suffering and the terror he had endured. She assured him that he was safe now, that the darkness could no longer harm him. She spoke of peace and release, urging his spirit to find rest. She also performed a cleansing ritual specifically focused on releasing the residual energy of fear from the house, visualizing a gentle light washing through the walls, dispelling the lingering darkness, and replacing it with peace and tranquility. Over the following weeks, the faint scratching sounds gradually faded away. The feeling of being watched lessened, replaced by a sense of quiet solitude. The dark mark on the floor seemed to soften, its edges becoming less defined. Amelia continued to live in the old Victorian, but the atmosphere had changed. The lingering echo of fear had finally begun to dissipate, replaced by a sense of peace and resilience. The open door remained firmly closed, no longer a symbol of terror, but a reminder of the darkness she had faced and the light she had found within herself and the history of her home. The house still held the whispers of the past, but now they were softer, gentler, the echoes of a troubled spirit finally finding rest. And Amelia, the current guardian of its history, lived on, forever changed by the open door and the shadows it revealed. Years passed in the old Victorian on Hemlock Hill, and the lingering echoes of fear gradually faded into the quiet hum of daily life. The dark mark on the floor eventually blended into the aged wood, becoming just another subtle imperfection in the house's long history. The scratching sounds never returned. Amelia continued her life, the experience with the open door and the shadows becoming a deeply personal memory, a testament to her resilience rather than a source of ongoing fear. She maintained a quiet respect for Elias Thorne's memory, occasionally playing a haunting folk tune, imagining it as a lullaby carrying peace through the years. The corner in her bedroom remained a simple space of reflection, no longer charged with a sense of urgent intervention, but imbued with a quiet understanding. Amelia found a deeper connection to her home, viewing it not just as a structure of wood and stone, but as a vessel carrying the stories of generations. She delved further into its history, uncovering more about the families who had lived within its walls, their joys and sorrows adding layers to the house's silent narrative. One spring afternoon, while tending her garden, Amelia met the new neighbors who had moved into the house down the hill. They were a young couple, Sarah and Ben, a serendipitous coincidence, she thought with a small smile, full of enthusiasm for their new home and the charm of the old neighborhood. Over time, Amelia formed a warm friendship with Sarah and Ben, sharing stories of the area and the history of the houses on Hemlock Hill. One evening, while having tea on Amelia's porch, Sarah mentioned that she had always been drawn to old houses, feeling a connection to the past within their walls. Sometimes, Sarah said thoughtfully, gazing at Amelia's Victorian, I almost feel like you can sense the echoes of the people who lived here before. Amelia nodded slowly, a knowing look in her eyes. She hesitated for a moment, then decided to share a carefully abridged version of her experiences, focusing on the historical aspects and the sense of a lingering presence connected to a former artist. She omitted the more terrifying details of the shadow figure and the sleep paralysis, sensing that it might be too unsettling for her new friends. Sarah listened intently, her eyes wide with fascination rather than fear. "That's incredible," she said. "I've always been interested in that kind of thing. It's like the house has a story to tell." Ben, ever pragmatist, was more skeptical but listened politely. "Old houses can play tricks on your mind," he suggested with a good-natured smile. Amelia didn't push the issue, content to share a part of her experience without delving into the full intensity of it. However, the conversation sparked a renewed sense of reflection within her. Had the cycle of fear truly been broken, or were the echoes of the past destined to repeat themselves in some way? A few months later, Sarah confided in Amelia that she had been experiencing strange dreams since moving into their house. She described a feeling of being unable to move, a heavy pressure on her chest, and fleeting glimpses of shadows and periphery of her vision. Amelia's heart sank. The parallels to her own initial experiences were unsettlingly clear. She listened carefully as Sarah described her growing unease, the feeling that something was not quite right in their old home. Amelia knew she couldn't remain silent. She gently shared more of her own story with Sarah, this time including the details of the sleep paralysis and the shadowy figure she had encountered. Sarah listened with a mixture of fear and understanding, her own experiences suddenly taking on a more ominous context. Together, Amelia and Sarah researched the history of Sarah and Ben's house. They discovered that it had been built around the same time as Amelia's, and that a tragedy had occurred there decades ago. A young woman had died unexpectedly in her sleep, her death shrouded in rumors of unexplained illness and a lingering sadness that some locals still spoke of. The parallels were striking. Another old house on Hemlock Hill, another unexplained death, and now similar unsettling experiences. Amelia realized that the lingering echoes of the past might not be confined to her own home. Perhaps there was a more pervasive energy, a cycle of unexplained phenomena connected to the history of the hill itself. Amelia reached out to Ben Carter, sharing the new developments. Ben, though concerned, emphasized the importance of not jumping to conclusions. He suggested that Sarah's experiences could be related to stress or other factors, but he agreed to investigate the history and energy of her house. Ben's investigation of Sarah and Ben's home revealed a similar pattern to what it found in Amelia's. Minor EMF fluctuations and a sense of residual emotional energy, particularly in the bedroom where the young woman had died. He also noted a recurring motif in some old photographs of the house, a slightly ajar door in the background. Ben worked with Sarah to create a protective space in her bedroom and taught her grounding and visualization techniques. He also conducted a gentle cleansing ritual in the house, focusing on releasing any lingering sadness or negative energy associated with the past tragedy. For a while, Sarah's unsettling dreams subsided. She felt a greater sense of peace in her home, and the fleeting shadows disappeared. It seemed that the cycle might be broken once more, the echoes of the past finally fading. However, the sense of a deeper connection between the houses on Hemlock Hill lingered in Amelia's mind. She began to research the history of the area more broadly, delving into old town records and local legends. She discovered that Hemlock Hill had been the site of several unexplained events over the centuries, whispers of strange occurrences and tragic endings woven into the fabric of its history. There were stories of unusual illnesses, unexplained disappearances, and a pervasive sense of unease that some longtime residents still felt. Amelia began to wonder if the open door wasn't just a personal experience or a phenomenon tied to a single house, but a recurring motif, a symbolic representation of vulnerability or connection to something unseen that permeated the entire hill. She shared her findings with Ben, who acknowledged the possibility of localized energy or historical pattern influencing the experiences in the old houses. He suggested that the concentration of older structures on the hill might create a unique energetic environment, more susceptible to residual energies, or even attracting certain kinds of phenomena. Together, Amelia, Sarah, and Ben organized a small gathering of residents from some of the older homes on Hemlock Hill. They shared their experiences and listened to the stories of others. Amelia was surprised to find that several people had experienced similar unsettling phenomena over the years. Strange dreams, fleeting shadows, a feeling of a presence, and even a recurring image of a slightly open door in their homes or in their minds. The gathering fostered a sense of community and shared understanding. It became clear that the experiences were not isolated incidents, but part of a larger pattern connected to the history and energy of Hemlock Hill. Ben suggested a collective effort to cleanse and harmonize the energy of the hill. Over the following months, the residents of the older homes worked together, organizing community cleansing rituals, sharing protective practices, and focusing their collective intention on creating a sense of peace and well-being throughout the neighborhood. They planted gardens with protective herbs, shared stories of hope and resilience, and consciously worked to shift the energetic focus of Hemlock Hill from its darker history towards a brighter future. Slowly, subtly, the atmosphere of the hill began to change. The pervasive sense of unease seemed to lift, replaced by a feeling of quiet strength and community connection. The unsettling experiences reported by residents began to diminish. Amelia continued to live in her Victorian, the open door now a symbol not of fear, but the power of collective intention and the ability to break cycles of negative energy. She understood that the echoes of the past might always linger in places with history, but that those echoes didn't have to define the present or dictate the future. The experience had taught her the importance of acknowledging the unseen, of respecting the power of belief and the influence of history. But it had also shown her the strength of community, the resilience of the human spirit, and the ability to collectively shape the energy of a place. The cycle on Hemlock Hill, it seemed, was finally beginning to break, the open doors of the past closing gently, allowing a new chapter of peace and understanding to unfold. And Amelia, the woman who had faced the darkness behind her own open door, now stood as a quiet guardian, a reminder that even the deepest shadows can eventually give way to the light of collective hope and a shared intention for peace. The whispers of the past might still linger, but now they carried a message of resilience, a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit to heal and to create a brighter future, one closed door at a time. The transformation of Hemlock Hill was gradual but undeniable. The collective efforts of the residents had woven a new energetic tapestry across the neighborhood, one of shared intention and quiet resilience. The unsettling whispers of the past seemed to soften, replaced by the gentle hum community and the vibrant energy of life moving forward. Amelia watched these changes unfold with a sense of quiet satisfaction. Her own Victorian, once a source of fear and unease, now felt truly like a sanctuary, filled with the warmth of sunlight and the comforting presence of her own strength. The open door, always securely latched, had become a silent symbol of her journey, a reminder of the darkness she had faced and the light she had found. The friendships between Amelia, Sarah, and Ben deepened, their shared experiences forging a unique bond. They continued to meet regularly, sharing stories and supporting the ongoing efforts to nurture a positive energy on Hemlock Hill. The annual neighborhood gatherings, once tinged with an unspoken awareness of the hill's darker history, now blossomed into vibrant celebrations of community spirit. One summer evening, as Amelia and Sarah were tending their respective gardens, Sarah confided that she was pregnant. A wave of joy washed over Amelia as she embraced her friend. The news a powerful affirmation of life and new beginnings taking root on Hemlock Hill. As Sarah's pregnancy progressed, Amelia felt a renewed sense of hope for the future of the neighborhood. The arrival of a new life felt like a powerful counterpoint to the echoes of the past, a vibrant symbol of the cycle of renewal. However, as Sarah entered her third trimester, she began to experience a recurrence of the unsettling dreams, the feeling of pressure, and the fleeting shadows. This time, however, the fear was different, intertwined with the anxieties of impending motherhood. Amelia and Ben rallied around Sarah, reinforcing protective practices and offering emotional support. Ben conducted another gentle cleansing of Sarah and Ben's home, focusing on creating a safe and nurturing environment for the new baby. One night, Sarah woke with a start, her heart pounding. She had dreamt a shadowy figure standing near the nursery door, a door she distinctly remembered closing before sleep. A wave of primal fear washed over her, the instinct to protect her unborn child amplifying her terror. Sarah called Amelia in a state of distress. Amelia rushed to her side, her own past anxieties resurfacing momentarily before being replaced by a fierce determination to help her friend. Together, they sat in the nursery, a room filled with the promise of new life, and reinforced the protective barriers. Amelia shared her own journey, emphasizing the power of inner strength and the support community. Ben arrived shortly after and conducted more focused cleansing of the nursery, invoking blessings of protection and peace. He explained that Sarah's heightened sensitivity during pregnancy might be making her more susceptible to residual energies. As they worked, they discovered an old wooden rocking horse tucked away in a corner of the attic, a relic from a previous family who had lived in the house. As Ben touched the rocking horse, his instruments registered a faint but distinct energy signature. This object might be holding on to something, Ben said thoughtfully. It's been here for a long time, witnessed a lot. With Sarah's permission, Ben carefully cleansed the rocking horse, visualizing any lingering negative energy being released and replaced with warmth and joy. That night, Sarah slept peacefully, her dreams filled with images of her baby and the vibrant life blossoming on Hemlock Hill. The shadowy figure did not return. The arrival of Sarah and Ben's baby, a healthy and vibrant little girl named Lily, brought a renewed sense of joy and optimism to the neighborhood. Lily's laughter echoed through the houses on the hill, a powerful antidote to the lingering whispers of the past. Amelia watched Lily grow, a symbol of the future taking root in the rich soil of Hemlock Hill. The cycle of fear seemed to have truly broken, replaced by a cycle of life, community, and shared hope. However, the understanding that the past could leave subtle imprints remained. Amelia continued her quiet practices of protection and mindfulness, a gentle acknowledgement of the unseen energies that surrounded them. Years turned into decades. The residents of Hemlock Hill continued to evolve, new families moving in, old ones passing on. But the sense of community and the shared commitment to fostering a positive energy on the hill remained strong. The annual gatherings grew larger, filled with laughter, music, and the vibrant energy of connection. Amelia, now an elder in the neighborhood, often shared her story with newcomers, not as a tale of terror, but as a testament to the power of resilience and the importance of community in overcoming darkness. The open door in her memory had transformed from a symbol of fear to a reminder of the strength she had found within herself and the collective power of Hemlock Hill. One autumn evening, as Amelia sat on her porch, watching the leaves fall in a kaleidoscope of color, a young couple stopped by her house. They had recently moved into the old Victorian down the hill, Sarah and Ben's former home. The young woman, Emily, mentioned that she felt a strange pull toward Amelia's house since they arrived. She asked about its history, sensing a unique energy surrounding it. Amelia smiled gently and invited them to sit. She shared the story of Elias Thorne, the troubled artist, and the unsettling experiences she had faced. She spoke of the fear, but also the understanding and the eventual peace she had found. Emily listened intently, her eyes filled with a mixture of curiosity and a sense of recognition. "It's strange," she said, "but I've had these fleeting images in my mind, a slightly open door, a feeling of sadness." Amelia nodded slowly, her heart filled with a sense of continuity. The echoes of the past might linger, but now they were met with understanding and openness, a willingness to acknowledge and address them with compassion and strength. She shared the protective practices and the importance of community, offering Emily and her partner her support. As they left, Emily turned back, a thoughtful expression on her face. "Thank you, Amelia," she said. "I feel like you've given me a key to understanding something I couldn't quite grasp." Amelia watched them walk down the hill, a sense of peace settling over her. The cycle wasn't necessarily broken in a definitive sense, but it had evolved. The darkness was no longer met with fear and isolation, but with understanding, community, and a collective intention for light. The open door, it seemed, could also be an invitation to connection, a space where the echoes of the past could be acknowledged and transformed by the strength of present. The hill, awakened by shared experience and a commitment to a brighter future, continued its slow, steady climb towards the light. And Amelia, the keeper of its stories, remained a steadfast presence, a beacon of resilience on the gentle slope of Hemlock Hill. Years continued their gentle passage on Hemlock Hill. Lily grew into a bright and curious child, her laughter a constant melody echoing through the neighborhood. Sarah and Ben's home, once touched by a lingering sadness, now vibrated with the vibrant energy of family life. The annual gatherings blossomed, drawing in new residents who embraced the spirit of community that had taken root. Amelia, now a beloved elder, found herself sharing the history of Hemlock Hill not just with newcomers, but also with the younger generation. Lily, in particular, was fascinated by the stories of the past, listening with wide-eyed wonder to tales of the old houses and the mysteries they held. Amelia carefully tailored her narratives, focusing on the themes of resilience and the power of community overcoming adversity, omitting the more frightening details until Lily was older. Emily and her partner settled into their Victorian, gradually weaving their own story into the tapestry of Hemlock Hill. Emily, true to her initial intuition, found herself drawn to the subtle energies of the house. She often spoke with Amelia, sharing her own fleeting sensations and dreams, finding comfort and guidance in Amelia's experiences. Together, they explored the history of their home, uncovering more about the families who had lived there and the echoes they might have left behind. One particularly still autumn evening, as Amelia and Emily were sitting on Amelia's porch, a new sound drifted up the hill, the distinct melody of a violin. It was a hauntingly beautiful tune, melancholic yet carrying a thread of hope. "That's lovely," Emily murmured, listening intently. "I haven't heard anyone play the violin around here before." Amelia's eyes widened slightly. The melody was familiar, a variation of the folk tune she associated with Elias Thorne, but played with a different instrument and a slightly different cadence. They followed the sound, their curiosity leading them to a newly renovated cottage nestled amongst the trees further up the hill. The cottage belonged to a recent arrival, a quiet and thoughtful man named Julian, who had moved to Hemlock Hill seeking solace and inspiration for his music. Julian, a talented violinist, explained that the melody was one he composed himself, inspired by the history and atmosphere of Hemlock Hill. He had felt particular connection to the older houses, sensing a deep well of stories within their walls. Amelia and Emily shared some of the history of the hill with Julian, including the tale of Elias Thorne and the folk tune he had cherished. Julian was fascinated, noting the subtle similarities between his own composition and the older melody. It felt like a thread connecting the past and the present, a continuation of the artistic spirit that had long resided on Hemlock Hill. Julian's music became a part of the soundscape of the hill, his violin often echoing through the trees, weaving its own narrative into the neighborhood's evolving story. His presence felt like another layer being added to the rich tapestry of Hemlock Hill, a testament to the enduring power of creativity and the way the past can inspire the present in unexpected ways. As the years continued their flow, Amelia noticed a subtle shift in her own perception of the unseen. The sharp edges of fear had softened, replaced by a gentle curiosity and a deeper understanding of the interconnectedness of energy and history. She no longer felt the need for constant vigilance, but maintained a quiet awareness, a sense of being attuned to the subtle rhythms of Hemlock Hill. One particularly clear winter night, as Amelia stood on her porch gazing at the starlit sky, she felt a distinct presence beside her, a sense of calm and quiet companionship. It wasn't the chilling dread she had experienced years ago, but a gentle warmth, a feeling of peaceful acceptance. She closed her eyes, a soft smile gracing her lips, sensing perhaps the lingering echo of Elias Thorne's spirit. Finally finding a measure of peace in the evolving harmony of Hemlock Hill, the old Victorian continued to stand sentinel on the hill, its open door now simply a part of its architecture, a welcoming threshold rather than a gateway to fear. It had witnessed generations come and go, the ebb and flow of joy and sorrow, the cycles of darkness and light. And Amelia, its steadfast guardian, had learned that the stories held within its walls were not meant to be feared, but understood, acknowledged, and woven into the ever-unfolding tapestry of Hemlock Hill. The hill itself seemed to awaken further with each passing year. The gardens flourished, the community bonds deepened, and the laughter of children echoed through the air. The darker aspects of its history were not forgotten, but they were held with a sense of perspective, integrated into the larger narrative of resilience and the enduring power of human connection. Even the fleeting sensations and dreams that some residents occasionally experienced seemed to take on a different quality, less menacing and more like gentle reminders of the past, whispers carried on the wind. They were acknowledged, understood within the context of the hill's history, and then allowed to fade without taking root in fear. Amelia, in her later years, became a kind of living historian of Hemlock Hill, sharing its stories with warmth and wisdom. She spoke of the challenges faced and overcome, the darkness confronted and transformed by the light of community. Her own journey, once marked by terror, had become a source of strength and inspiration for others. One afternoon, Lily, now a thoughtful teenager, sat with Amelia on the porch. She asked about the open door, a detail that had always intrigued her in Amelia's stories. Amelia smiled gently. "The open door, Lily," she said, "can be many things. It can be a place of vulnerability, a gateway to fear, but it can also be an invitation, a space for connection, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there's always a possibility of something new, something brighter, stepping through." Lily pondered her words, her young mind grasping the deeper meaning. The story of Hemlock Hill, she realized, was not just a tale of shadows and fear, but a testament to the enduring power of hope and the strength found in community. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the hill, the sound of Julian's violin drifted through the air, a beautiful melody that wove together the threads of the past and the present. The tapestry of Hemlock Hill continued to grow, richer and more vibrant with each passing year, its open doors welcoming the future with a quiet sense of hope and resilience. And Amelia, the heart of its living history, watched the stars begin to appear, knowing that the cycle of fear had been broken, replaced by a legacy of connection and light. The passage of time on Hemlock Hill continued its gentle, cyclical rhythm. Generations came and went, each leaving their own subtle imprint on the neighborhood's evolving story. The old houses stood as silent witnesses, their walls holding the echoes of laughter and sorrow, of fear confronted and peace embraced. Amelia, now a venerable figure whose life had become deeply intertwined with the history of the hill, carried the stories within her, sharing them with a quiet wisdom that resonated with young and old alike. Lily blossomed into a compassionate and insightful young woman, deeply connected to the spirit of Hemlock Hill. She had absorbed Amelia's stories not just as tales of the past, but as lessons in resilience, empathy, and the power of community. She often volunteered at local historical societies, drawn to the tangible remnants of bygone eras, understanding that the past held valuable keys to navigating the present. Emily and her partner continued to thrive in their Victorian, their home filled with warmth and creativity. Emily, inspired by Amelia's journey and her own subtle sensitivities, became a student of local folklore and energy work, seeking to understand the unseen currents that flowed through Hemlock Hill. She often collaborated with Julian, whose music continued to weave through the neighborhood, their artistic expressions finding a unique harmony in their shared connection to the hill's history. Julian's music evolved, incorporating elements of the older folk tune he had discovered, blending it with his own contemporary style. His compositions became a kind of sonic tapestry of Hemlock Hill, carrying the echoes of the past into the present, a reminder of the enduring artistic spirit that had long resided there. As Amelia entered her twilight years, she began to think about the legacy she would leave behind. It wasn't just the stories she had shared, but the tangible feeling of peace and resilience that now permeated Hemlock Hill. The darkness she had faced had ultimately paved the way for a deeper understanding and a stronger sense of community. One crisp autumn afternoon, Lily, now a young adult with a keen interest in local history, sat with Amelia on the porch, the familiar scent of fallen leaves filling the air. Lily held a worn, leather-bound journal in her hands, the Elias Thorne's journal, which Amelia had carefully preserved. "Amelia," Lily said softly, her fingers tracing the faded script. "Reading this, it's so sad, but also hopeful. He was so tormented, but your story shows that his darkness didn't have to be the end." Amelia smiled gently, her gaze distant. "The past has its weight, Lily, but it doesn't have to define us. We have the power to choose the light. Do you think the open door is still a thing?" Lily asked, her voice barely a whisper. Amelia took Lily's hand, her touch frail but firm. "The open door, my dear, is always a possibility. Life is full of thresholds, moments of vulnerability where unseen energies can try to enter. But we have learned on Hemlock Hill that we don't have to face them alone. Our strength lies in our connection, in our willingness to support each other, to shine our collective light." As Amelia's physical strength began to wane, the community of Hemlock Hill rallied around her, offering their love and support. Emily used her knowledge of energy work to create a peaceful and comforting environment in Amelia's home, while Julian's music often drifted through the open windows, a soothing balm for her spirit. Sarah and Ben's family, now including Lily as a cherished friend, became a constant source of warmth and companionship. In her final days, Amelia gathered the younger generation of Hemlock Hill around her, sharing the complete story of the open door, the terror she had faced, the understanding she had gained, and the peace that had ultimately blossomed. She entrusted Elias Thorne's journal to Lily, knowing that the young woman would be a thoughtful keeper of his story. "The inheritance of Hemlock Hill," Amelia said, her voice soft but clear, "is not just these old houses and the stories within them. It is a light we have created together, the resilience we have found, the understanding that even in the face of darkness, community and compassion can prevail. Remember the open door, my dears, not with fear, but with awareness and the knowledge that you are never truly alone." As Amelia peacefully passed away, a profound sense of quiet gratitude settled over Hemlock Hill. The community mourned her loss, but they also celebrated the long and impactful life she had lived, a life that had been instrumental in healing the wounds of the past and fostering a brighter future for the neighborhood. Lily became a keeper of the flame, continuing to share the stories of Hemlock Hill, including Amelia's journey and the tale of Elias Thorne. She understood that acknowledging the darker aspects of their history was essential for appreciating the light they had collectively created. Emily and Julian continued their artistic collaborations, their work often exploring the themes of memory, resilience, and the interconnectedness of past and present. Their creations became a part of the ongoing narrative of Hemlock Hill, adding their unique voices to the chorus of stories the old houses held. Sarah and Ben's family continued to grow, their home a vibrant hub of life and laughter, a testament to the enduring power of new beginnings on Hemlock Hill. The children who grew up on the hill learned the stories of the past not as frightening tales, but as lessons in courage and community. The annual gatherings continued, now carrying a deeper sense of shared history and collective strength. The open doors of the old houses welcomed new generations, not with the threat of unseen darkness, but with the warmth of community and the promise of a shared future. The tapestry of Hemlock Hill continued to be woven, thread by thread, year by year, each life adding its unique color and texture. The echoes of the past were not silenced, but they were integrated into the larger design, a reminder of the journey taken and the light that had been found. And the legacy of Amelia, the woman who had faced the darkness behind her own open door, lived on in the heart of the community, a beacon of resilience and the enduring power of human connection on the gentle slope of Hemlock Hill. The hill had not just awakened. It had learned to carry its light forward, generation after generation, ensuring that the open doors of the future would always be met with hope and the unwavering strength of community. Decades flowed into one another on Hemlock Hill, each season painting the landscape with familiar hues, yet carrying the subtle nuances of change. The children who had grown up hearing Amelia's stories now had children of their own, and the narrative of the open door, once a tale whispered with a hint of fear, had transformed into a cherished legend of resilience and community strength. Lily, now a respected historian in her own right, dedicated much of her work to preserving the unique history of Hemlock Hill. She meticulously archived old photographs, journals, and oral histories, ensuring that the stories of the past, both light and shadow, were not forgotten. Elias Thorne's journal remained a central piece of her collection, a poignant reminder of the darkness that had once lingered and the light that had ultimately prevailed. Emily and Julian continued their artistic journey, their collaborations evolving into multimedia installations that explored the layered history of Hemlock Hill. Their work often incorporated Julian's evocative music, Emily's intricate energy-infused artwork, and archival materials curated by Lily, creating immersive experiences that allowed visitors to connect with the hill's past in profound ways. Sarah and Ben's family flourished, their home a vibrant hub of intergenerational connection. Lily remained a close friend, and the younger generation of their family grew up hearing the tales of Hemlock Hill, understanding the importance of community and the enduring power of hope. The annual gatherings on Hemlock Hill evolved into a vibrant tapestry of tradition and innovation. The older residents shared their memories, while the younger ones brought fresh perspectives and new energy. The sense of collective identity, forged in the face of past unease, remained a strong and unifying force. One particularly warm summer, a new family moved into the old Victorian that had once been Amelia's home. They were a young couple, Maya and David, artists drawn to historic charm and the palpable sense of community on Hemlock Hill. They were aware of the house's history, having heard the local stories, but they were drawn to its beauty and the feeling of peace that now permeated the neighborhood. As Maya and David settled in, they often visited Lily, eager to learn more about the history of their new home and the stories of Hemlock Hill. Lily shared Amelia's story with them, emphasizing the themes of resilience and the triumph of community over fear. One evening, while exploring the attic, Maya discovered a small, hidden compartment behind a loose panel, the same compartment where Amelia had found Elias Thorne's journal. Inside, Maya found a small, intricately carved wooden bird, its feathers depicted with sharp, almost dark lines. A shiver ran down Maya's spine. The carving echoed the descriptions of the strange dark feathers from Amelia's story. She shared her discovery with David, and they immediately contacted Lily. Lily examined the wooden bird with a thoughtful expression. It was unlike anything she had seen in her research on Elias Thorne. It felt older, perhaps predating his time in the house. Together, Lily, Maya, and David delved deeper into the earliest history of the Victorian, poring over land deeds and local archives from the 18th and 19th centuries. They discovered that the land on which the house was built had once been considered a place of unusual energy by the indigenous people who had inhabited the area. There were legends of a thin place where the veil between worlds was believed to be particularly permeable. This new information cast a different light on the history of Hemlock Hill. The unsettling experiences might not have been solely tied to Elias Thorne's torment, but perhaps connected to a deeper, more ancient energy inherent to the land itself. The open door could be a recurring symbol of this inherent vulnerability. Lily contacted Emily and Julian, sharing their new findings. Inspired by this expanded understanding of Hemlock Hill's history, they began to develop a new multimedia installation that explored the deeper, more ancient energies of the land, weaving in the indigenous legends and the stories of subsequent inhabitants. Julian's music took on new textures, incorporating ancient melodies and rhythms. Emily's artwork delved into more abstract representations of energy and flow. Lily's archival research provided a rich historical context for their artistic explorations. As Maya and David continued to live in Victorian, they embraced its history with a sense of respect and curiosity. Maya, a sculptor, began to incorporate natural elements from Hemlock Hill into her work, sensing a deep connection to the land. David, a writer, started a project exploring the oral histories of the neighborhood, capturing the evolving narrative of the community. One autumn evening, as Maya was working in her garden, she felt a faint but distinct sense of presence nearby, a feeling of quiet observation. It wasn't frightening, but rather a sense of ancient awareness. She paused her work, listening to the rustling leaves and the gentle breeze, feeling a connection to the land that felt both profound and comforting. She shared her experience with David and Lily, and they discussed the possibility that the thin place energy of Hemlock Hill wasn't necessarily malevolent, but simply a heightened sensitivity to other realms, a place where the veil was more easily perceived. The unsettling experiences of the past might have been the result of fear and misunderstanding interacting with this inherent energy. Inspired by this new perspective, the community of Hemlock Hill began to explore ways to harmonize with the land's unique energy. They organized workshops on mindfulness and meditation, practices aimed at fostering a sense of inner peace and connection to the natural world. They collaborated with local indigenous elders, learning about the traditional ways of honoring the land and its energies. The annual gatherings took on a new dimension, incorporating elements of mindfulness and connection to nature. There were moments of quiet contemplation, guided meditations in the woods, and storytelling circles that honored the ancient history of the land. The perception of Hemlock Hill began to shift, both within the community and in the surrounding areas. It was no longer seen as a place with a dark past, but as a unique location with a rich and layered history, a place where the veil between worlds might be thinner, but where community, understanding, and a connection to land could transform fear into a deeper sense of belonging. Maya and David, living in the old Victorian, felt a growing sense of connection to the house and the land. They often left the windows slightly ajar, not out of fear, but as a gesture of openness, a symbolic acknowledgement of the unseen energies and the interconnectedness of all things. The open door for them had become a symbol of curiosity and a willingness to explore the deeper mysteries of Hemlock Hill. The tapestry of Hemlock Hill continued to unfold, each generation adding its unique threads, weaving together the stories of the past, the experiences of the present, and the hopes for the future. The inheritance of the hill was no longer just a memory of darkness overcome, but the ongoing practice of living in harmony with its unique energy, fostering a community built on understanding, resilience, and a shared connection to the land and its enduring stories. And the open doors of Hemlock Hill welcomed the unfolding present with a quiet sense of wonder and a deep-seated belief in the power of collective light. The gentle rhythm of life on Hemlock Hill persisted, each year adding new layers to its rich and evolving story. The community, now deeply rooted in a shared understanding of their unique history and the subtle energies of the land, moved forward with a quiet strength and a profound sense of interconnectedness. The fear that had once clung to the old houses had been transmuted into a respectful awareness, a recognition of the unseen currents that flowed through their lives and the land beneath their feet. Lily, her hair now streaked with silver, remained the steadfast keeper of Hemlock Hill's history. Her archives had grown, filled with the stories and artifacts of generations, a testament to the enduring spirit of the community. Elias Thorne's journal, carefully preserved, served not as a relic of terror, but as a reminder of the darkness that could be overcome with understanding and compassion. Emily and Julian's artistic collaborations continued to evolve, their work gaining recognition beyond Hemlock Hill. Their immersive installations, now incorporating augmented reality and interactive elements, allowed audiences to experience the layered history of the hill in deeply personal ways, fostering empathy for the past and a heightened awareness of the present. Maya and David remained anchors in the old Victorian, their lives deeply intertwined with the community and the land. Maya's sculptures, crafted from the very earth of Hemlock Hill, resonated with a primal energy, while David's evolving collection of oral histories captured the nuanced tapestry of the neighborhood's experiences. Their home became a welcoming space for artists and thinkers drawn to the unique atmosphere of the hill. The annual gatherings on Hemlock Hill continued to be vibrant celebrations, now infused with a deeper sense of ceremony and connection to the land. Indigenous elders often participated, sharing ancient wisdom and guiding the community in honoring the thin place energy with respect and intention. The open doors of the old houses welcomed not just neighbors, but also a growing number of visitors drawn to the hill's unique story and its palpable sense of peace. One crisp autumn, a young scholar named Ben, another echo of the past, noted with a gentle smile by Lily, arrived on Hemlock Hill, drawn by Lily's extensive archives and the intriguing history of community. Ben was researching the intersection of folklore, energy, and community resilience in unique historical settings. Hemlock Hill, with its documented history of unsettling experiences and its subsequent transformation, proved to be a compelling case study. Ben spent weeks immersed in Lily's archives, poring over journals, letters, and local accounts. He interviewed longtime residents, including Lily, Emily, Julian, and Maya, meticulously documenting their experiences and the community's journey. He was particularly fascinated by the recurring motif of the open door and its evolving symbolism. Through his research, Ben began to formulate a theory. The thin place energy of Hemlock Hill, while inherently neutral, could act as a kind of amplifier for prevailing emotional and energetic states of the community. In times of fear and isolation, as with Elias Thorne's torment, this energy might have manifested in unsettling ways. However, as the community cultivated connection, understanding, and a shared intention for peace, the same energy seemed to support and amplify those positive states. The open door, therefore, became a kind of barometer, reflecting the collective consciousness of Hemlock Hill. Ben's research culminated in a widely acclaimed book that explored the unique dynamics of Hemlock Hill, highlighting its journey from a place touched by fear to a model of community resilience and harmonious coexistence with subtle energies. The book drew visitors from around the world, curious to experience the unique atmosphere of the hill and learn from its story. As Hemlock Hill gained wider recognition, the community remained grounded in its core values. They welcomed visitors with open hearts, sharing their history and their practices, but they also remained detective of the hill's unique energy, ensuring that its newfound attention did not disrupt the delicate balance they had cultivated. One spring, a young family moved into a newly renovated cottage on Hemlock Hill. They were drawn to the area's reputation for community and its connection to nature. Their young daughter, Alara, was a particularly sensitive child, often speaking of seeing shimmering lights and feeling gentle whispers in the air. Maya, recognizing Alara's sensitivity, took the young girl under her wing, sharing her own experiences and guiding her in understanding and interacting with the subtle energies of Hemlock Hill. Alara, growing up in an environment of acceptance and understanding, learned to receive the thin place energy not as something to fear, but as a source of wonder and connection. As Alara grew, she became a natural conduit for the land's energy, a bridge between the seen and unseen. She often spoke of feeling the emotions of the past lingering in certain places, but also the vibrant energy of the present and the hopeful potential of the future. She became a kind of intuitive guide for the community, helping them to remain attuned to the subtle shifts in the hill's energetic landscape. The cycle on Hemlock Hill continued, but it had been transformed. The initial fear and isolation had given way to understanding, community, and a conscious effort to harmonize with the land's unique energy. The open doors of the old houses now symbolized not vulnerability, but a willingness to connect, to learn, and to evolve. The inheritance of Hemlock Hill was no longer just a story of overcoming darkness, but an ongoing practice of living in mindful connection with its history, its community, and the subtle energies that flowed to the land, ensuring that the light they had collectively cultivated would continue to illuminate their path forward generation after generation. The tapestry of Hemlock Hill, woven with threads of the past, the present, and the unfolding future, continued its beautiful and intricate design, guided by the enduring spirit of its community and the gentle wisdom of the land itself. The years continued their unhurried dance across Hemlock Hill, each season painting the landscape with familiar beauty, yet carrying the subtle imprints of growth and change within the tight-knit community. The initial anxiety surrounding the hill's unique history had long since softened into a deep respect for its layered narratives and the subtle energies that pulsed beneath its soil. The open doors of the old houses now stood as welcoming thresholds, symbols of community that had learned to embrace its past, navigate the present with mindful awareness, and step into the future with shared sense of interconnectedness. Lily, now a venerable elder herself, passed on the mantle of Hemlock Hill's history to a new generation of passionate keepers, ensuring that the stories of resilience and transformation would continue to be shared. Elias Thorne's journal, its pages now bearing the gentle patina of time, remain a powerful testament to the journey from fear to understanding. Emily and Julian's artistic legacy continued to inspire, their multimedia installations finding permanent homes in local museums and cultural centers, drawing visitors who sought to connect with profound history and unique energy of Hemlock Hill. Their work served as a bridge between the seen and unseen, fostering empathy for the past and a heightened awareness of the present moment. Maya and David remained anchors in the old Victorian, their home a sanctuary for creativity and connection. Maya's earth-infused sculpture stood as tangible representations of the hill's deep-rooted energy, while David's ever-expanding collection of oral histories captured the nuanced evolution of the community's collective narrative. Alara, now a young woman deeply attuned to the subtle energies of Hemlock Hill, became a guiding light for the community. Her intuitive insights helped residents navigate the ebb and flow of the land's energy, fostering a deeper sense of harmony and balance. She often led workshops on energy awareness and mindful connection to the natural world, empowering others to cultivate their own sensitivity and inner peace. The annual gatherings on Hemlock Hill evolved into vibrant festivals of interconnectedness, drawing people from all walks of life who were drawn to the community's unique story and its palpable sense of peace. Indigenous elders continue to share their wisdom, guiding ceremonies that honor the land and its ancient energies. The open doors of the old houses welcomed visitors with genuine warmth, embodying the spirit of community that had learned to embrace its history and extend its light outward. One particularly vibrant spring, a group of young researchers arrived on Hemlock Hill, drawn by Ben's seminal work and the community's reputation for harmonious coexistence with subtle energies. They sought to study the unique energetic field of the hill and the ways in which the community's collective consciousness had influenced its manifestation. Alara became a key collaborator in their research, her intuitive abilities providing invaluable insights into the subtle fluctuations of the land's energy. The researchers utilized advanced scientific equipment alongside Alara's intuitive guidance, seeking to bridge the gap between scientific understanding and energetic perception. Their findings revealed a complex and dynamic energetic field surrounding Hemlock Hill, a field that seemed to resonate with the collective emotional and intentional states of the community. Periods of fear and unease in the hill's history appear to correlate with more chaotic and dissonant energy patterns, while the subsequent cultivation of peace and connection corresponded with more harmonious and coherent energy signatures. The researchers' work provided a scientific framework for what the residents of Hemlock Hill had long experienced intuitively, further validating their journey of transformation. Their findings also offered valuable insights for other communities seeking to cultivate greater harmony and resilience in the face of challenging histories or unique energetic environments. As the years continued their gentle flow, Hemlock Hill became a beacon of interconnectedness, a place where the past was honored, the present was embraced with mindful awareness, and the future was approached with a deep sense of collective hope. The open doors of its old houses symbolized a community that had learned to navigate the subtle realms with courage, compassion, and profound understanding of their shared human experience and their deep connection to the land. The cycle of life on Hemlock Hill continued, each generation inheriting not just the stories of the past, but the wisdom of resilience and the power of interconnectedness. The land itself seemed to respond to the community's harmonious intentions, flourishing with a vibrant energy that nurtured both body and spirit. The whispers on the wind carried not echoes of fear, but gentle reminders of the deep connection that bound the community together, a connection that extended beyond the visible realm, resonating with the subtle energies of the land and the enduring spirit of Hemlock Hill. And the open doors remained, welcoming each new day with the quiet confidence of community that had learned to transform darkness into light, fear into understanding, and isolation into a profound and enduring sense of belonging within the intricate tapestry of life on their unique and cherished hill.